Sorry, I didn't realize you wanted me to open the meeting, or I was just had my headphones on, so I didn't have a microphone.
Yes, a welcome comment from our fearless fiscal leader up there in Eureka.
So I
If you
see
want to say a few things.
we have a couple, well, Anne was here last time. We have Jack Bareilles here this time, who is a grant writer extraordinaire for the
Right.
school districts. And so
Right.
today we're going to be opening our expert session, and Kelly from the County of Mendocino is going to talk about community development block grants, which are an incredibly useful and obnoxious tool. So having somebody with experience is great. We also work a lot with Jeff Lucas, who's just coming in right now, who is another CDBG expert, and he and Kelly work together a lot. So we'll hear what they have to say.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, so this is Jack. Nice to have you with us. And if you're a grant writer, you should not put your email and phone number in the chat because you might have a lot of people calling you. But maybe if you want more people to call you, feel free to do that. Can't hear you, though. Something's up with your microphone, maybe. Can't hear you. Yeah. But nope. Am I missing it? Okay. I was hearing Susan pretty good, so.
That's all on you, Jack. Oop.
Oh, he's going to come back on. Okay. And thank you for coming back. I think you're the arts person, right?
I am an arts person. This is true.
Okay.
I'm multitasking a little bit here because I'm on a deadline for a piece of art. But yes.
Oh, good. Good. Well,
Art lady. Well, thank you. I'm glad that you think I'm a lady. Great.
I'm glad that you were able to come back, and I know we want to follow up with you on the arts discussion. We had some of that with Calder earlier last week, and I think we'd just like to follow up with you on some of that. So
also, good. Josh, just in that vein, I met with Jackie Dandino, who's working with Anne on a parks project, but she was just sort of talking about the bigger picture of how do we find long-term funding that's not, constantly grant dependent. Like, could we consider and think about what are some funding mechanisms for the arts? I don't know what that looks like, but I thought it was an interesting conversation. So
anything that can speak to sustainability, because grant funding ain't it. But even if grant funds have been encumbered in this government, it could still be swept.
Right. So. Yes. So that's the future which we're going to be navigating. But let's learn what we can from Jeff and Kelly on the community development block grant program. And so normally these expert sessions go with about a half an hour-ish, more or less, of presentation. I figure Kelly and Jeff, since you guys are going to kind of be tag teaming, whatever kind of time you need there. And then you can tell us if you'd prefer sort of holding questions to the end or ask as you go. Some people have different preferences there. Do you have a preference?
I'm definitely ask as you go person. CDBG is a pretty massive program. And unless you have a very, very detailed program where you want to get into the extreme weeds, please feel free to ask away as we go through it.
Right. And we can also, of course, use the chat for those and kind of take up questions as they fit within the flow. But usually it's, first half or 2/3 with the presentation and then, open the floor for discussion. So with that as a background, pass the mic to you, Kelly and Jeff. to hold forth on this exciting program. Thank you.
Go ahead, get started here. Well, just wanted to start by saying thank you to everybody for being here today. I know there's a lot going on in everybody's lives, and we are here to talk about just one of the many funding sources that are available out there. CDBG is a state program, but it is a flow through from the federal government. I'll just take a minute. My name is Kelly Hansen, and I'm with the County of Mendocino in the Executive Office in the Grants Unit. And I'll let Jeff introduce himself.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm Jeff Lucas. We have a small consulting firm in Northern California. A lot of our work is in CDBG. And honestly, it's been my pleasure to work with Kelly. She's relatively new to the program, but she sure has picked it up fast, and she's very detail oriented. So she's going to do the lion's share. I just have a couple of examples I want to elaborate on towards the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Great. So what is CDBG? CDBG is the Community Development Block Grant Program. It is designed to assist rural communities and cities to improve economic opportunities to meet their community revitalization needs. HUD, which is the federal agency, envisioned CDBG funds to be used as gap financing to add the final necessary funds for a project to be successful. So the key thing to know here is that the federal government, which is the flow through to the state agency, HCD, really wants this to be part of a capital, these funds to be part of a capital stack. So they really want to see you being imaginative, but also bringing other resources to the table with this program. Grants are also vary every year because there are different allocations. So what is going to be available is going to change, and it is somewhat predictable, but you can't depend upon it. Who is eligible for the funds? Now, this is also an interesting question that gets posed a lot. There are two types of CDBG, economic development and community development. There's entitlement and non-entitlement. What we're talking about today is non-entitlement. So this is the competitive funds. The non-entitlement program are for cities with a population under 50,000 and counties with a population under 200,000. So that is pretty much our region. Also, non-federally recognized Native American communities. We don't have any colonias in our area. Those are mostly on the southwestern border. So what is the purpose of CDBG? CDBG is primarily for housing, for creating a suitable living environment and expanding economic opportunities for people that are considered low and moderate income. So really with this program, when you're looking at designing programs or projects, they really want to look at how are you developing or rehabilitating housing or creating economic opportunities, mostly either with creating or retaining jobs for, and this is the key provision, low and moderate income folks. And how CDBG defines that is that they are families or households with individuals with incomes that do not exceed 80% of the county median 80% of the county's median income adjusted for family or household size. This is based on, a lot of this information is based on census data. There's all sorts of fun tables, and they now have an interactive map where you can look at this. So yes, Jack.
Just to confirm then, so it'd be adjusted by the median family income in here last time I looked was like 48 grand, 53 grand, something like that. This would be adjusted if I've got one kid, two kids in the family, and it scales that way, correct?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'll take my hand on if I can. Thanks.
Yeah. So if you're doing a housing program, that's really important for your household size. But it is relevant based on what kind of program you're doing as well. This slide is the heart of CDBG, and we can spend some time here. This is how you're going to design your project. Your project needs to do two things. It has to meet a national objective and it has to be an eligible activity. So first, you have to meet a national objective. It has to create a benefit to a lower moderate income person. And HCD basically measures that, and you can demonstrate that benefit in 4 ways. They love their acronyms, just like any governmental agency. They say LMA, LMC, LMH, or LMJ. So an area LMA is low mod area benefit. So for this, you have to show that the benefits of the program will be available to all the residents of the service area, and at least 51% of the residents of that area have to be in that low moderate income demographic. So it could be a census block, it could be the county, but it needs to be a geographical area that you can measure and show that at least 51% of the residents are low mod based on census data. You can get down into the weeds and do your own community survey if you want, but that is going to need a investment of resources to do that kind of work. There is the second way that you can do to show benefit, which is LMC, which is limited clientele objective. So you can provide benefits to a specific group of eligible persons, which are generally presumed by HCD to be principally low mod income persons. The list of folks on that list right now are abused children, elderly persons, survivors of domestic violence, persons experiencing houselessness, adults that meet the definition of severely disabled, adults with functional illiteracy, persons living with AIDS, and migrant farm workers. Jeff, do I have that correct?
Yep.
Am I forgetting anyone? Okay. So these are people that need to get needs met. And if you provide a program or service or project that meets those needs, exclusive, like a dedicated need service to those groups, you are considered to meet a low moderate income benefit. Next is LMH. This is low moderate housing. So the objective is carried out by providing improved permanent residential structures that will be occupied by low moderate households upon completion of the project. To qualify for this, the activity must result in housing that will be occupied by the households upon completion. The housing can either be owner or renter occupied and can be either single or multifamily. And the household has to be considered LMI when they enter. So that's that the family or the household and their income does not exceed 80% of the county median income adjusted for family or household size. So as you can see here, you're having to do a lot of demographic research, either by doing background on your census data and or also doing demographic surveys of your clientele that you're serving. So that's important to take note of as you're designing your projects, that you're going to have to collect all the data as you're going. LMJ. So this is the fourth way that you can show benefit to low moderate income by your project, is job creation or retention activities that emanate from economic development activities that involve employment of persons that are majority of whom are low moderate persons. So these people, the activity is started, that they, at least 51% of the folks that receive the activity usually it's creating a job or retention of a job, are on a full-time base equivalent, so FTE basis, are either held by low moderate persons or considered to be available to low mod persons. And Jeff, could you explain that a little bit more? Because this is one that I know trips me up a little bit sometimes.
Sure. Just briefly, the program requires that, for example, if you provide a low interest loan to a business and they hire, let's say they hire 3 people, 2 of those have to meet that low moderate household income level. And they have to, for every $35,000 that's loaned, the business has to create 1 full-time equivalent job. Also, that's part of the deal. And so the way we do that is we just take a snapshot of what the income level is, what the person says it is. They sign a certification form indicating number of people in their family, and then what their income was annually. And if they meet the CDBG criteria, then they meet that 51% criteria. The business only has to keep the employee for a 3-month period on payroll. Our intention is, of course, to have a healthy business that lasts longer, but the program only requires 3 months. So you take a look and make sure that same person is on payroll for that period of time, and then you've met that requirement.
Thank you, Jeff. So it can be a little tricky when you're first learning about these different ways to qualify, and we'll get into some of these projects. The second national objective that you can meet when you're designing a project is aid in the prevention or elimination of blight. So this one is one that you can do. If you want to go after this category, you do have to get it pre-approved with HCD before you submit your application. To give an example of what a project that would be fit this description is, currently the County of Mendocino has an open standard application with HCD for the Round Valley Community Cleanup Project. So we currently are working on cleaning up illegal dump sites in Round Valley, working with Round Valley Indian tribes. So we're going to do community cleanup efforts, as well as hiring a formal large-scale crew to clean up the large illegal dump sites. So there's one site that has over 100 wrecked vehicles on it. They're going to come in and clean that up. And then there's a couple other large illegal dump sites. And we're also going to do community engagement and education around that. So that is that is an example of that one. The third way you qualify is that projects that have a particular urgency because of existing conditions that pose a serious and immediate threat to the health or welfare of the community. This qualification is extremely rare, and it also has to be pre-qualified with HCD. Jeff, have you ever seen this one used?
No, that's why it's extremely rare. No, haven't seen it.
Let's see, there's a bunch of chats. Would LMJ support expanding existing businesses? Theoretically, possibly, depending on the program. Mendocino County currently is closing out a project right now. We're almost done with closeout, where we had a COVID business assistance loan program, where local businesses could come to us and apply for loans. They could get up to $35,000 for every job that they either retained or created for LMI individuals. Most of we gave out 3 loans, and all the loans were in the $100,000 to $180,000 range. So they just had to show to us that they created these jobs for an X number of people for an X number of time. And then we had to do a demographic survey of those employees. They had to tell us what they were going to use the capital for. One bought a medical transport van. Another bought it for bought equipment for their new venture for a grocery store and working capital. And the other one refinanced their. Jeff, help me explain what Cold Creek used their loan for.
Yeah, they did some refinancing of existing debt. I
Thank
think
you.
it brought that stuff like 10, 11 or 12% high interest debt down to like 1% or 2% financing. And then I think they also bought some equipment with it, Kelly. So it was a mixed use.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things you can do. We also have an application in, it has not yet been approved for business micro enterprise business assistance, where you can do technical assistance, kind of small business enterprise uh, workshops, one-on-one coaching. CDBG can be used to help fund some of that activity as well. So not only does your project have to do number one, it also has to meet number two, which is CDB eligible activities. So eligible activities, they can kind of fall into two buckets, either community development or economic development. The list here is not exhaustive, but this is typically the ones that you see. You have everything from public facility improvements. When they say architectural barrier removal, those are typically improvements, ADA improvements. To note with these items, your projects have to serve the general public. They cannot be anything that, let's say you're going to improve a public building, a governmental building, or a nonprofit building. You couldn't do you could do ADA improvements if the building was completely public facing. If you want to do the back of the house of the employee bathrooms and bring them to ADA, CDBG wouldn't cover that part of the project. So everything has to be serving in service to the public. You can do everything from one-on-one economic development technical assistance to acquisition of property. You can do planning and capacity building. You can rehab buildings. You can do business loans. You can do revolving loans. So you can have them be paid back to you and then have a revolving fund called program income. You could structure a program where you have program income. You can structure loans to be forgivable. There's a lot of really interesting ways you can structure programs. And there is a handout that I put in the chat where this gets a little tricky because certain things you cannot do for certain clientele. This is the lovely matrix that becomes the handbook to our lives, mine and Jeff's, that certain activities are available for certain types of national objectives. So you can use funds for childcare centers for low mod clientele, but not for these others. You can do senior centers, make sense because you're serving seniors. You can acquire property for a low mod area or for just limited for clientele or for housing, but not to create jobs. You can fire stations and equipment, but it has to be low mod area. You can do health services, childcare services, mental health services. You can do homeowner assistance. You can do energy improvements for homeowners. You can do housing counseling. You can do, there's a lot you can do, but there's a lot of rules you have to thread through as well. So this matrix is probably the easiest way to explain how to marry a national objective to an eligible activity. The next step would be once you have a project idea to go to your HCD representative and talk through your project concept. Before I move on, does anybody have any questions?
Just, I want to make clear, the eligible activities, and you say HCD, so it's the state making that determination. That's not the feds, or is it a combination of both?
Do you want to take it, Jeff?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Jeff.
sure. The HUD federal regulations are all those activities on that matrix.
Right.
Those are all things you can do with CDBG funds. The red is what the states has said, you're not going to do it here.
And
Okay.
of course, only applying to non-entitlement communities.
Yeah, exactly. Entitlement communities, larger jurisdictions can use those funds for everything on that list. Does that help, Greg?
It reinforces
What you
Certainly.
thought?
yeah. Well, I mean, I've been in the battle a long time, but
Yep, yep.
yeah, but I think it's an interesting overlay, and I'm always curious about how they come up with that. And it's an
So,
interesting discussion within the Redwood Region Rise and the other regional prospects is why are you setting the priorities of eligible activities and not us regions, which you say is where the power should be, right? So anyway, but I always go right to policy. So
And here at the top of this matrix is what's allowed. The color coding tells you what's allowed by HCD, what's not allowed by HCD, what's not allowed by HUD, which is the federal agency. It's important to note that this revision to this matrix happened this year. So if you've worked with people that have worked with CDBG and might know the old, is familiar with how it ran previously, there's been a lot of change within the last 12 months to this program. And it does bear noting that there's been a lot of big shifts within CDBG and how it's being run.
and what's the
And
theme around that rather than the detail?
the theme is that HCD got monitored by HUD, and now that they're really looking at every line, every detail, every regulation very closely, and really focusing on all the technicalities of your application, of your compliance, of your monitoring, and really paying attention to all the little things. I'm sure Jeff could have more to say on that one because he's played in this pool a lot longer.
oh, I'll save that for later, Kelly. You're doing so good, and we're on a positive roll here.
All right, well, we'll keep going. We got more. So I've already talked a little bit about this. What can you do with these funds? Because it is something that can be a force for good in your community and really make an impact. And what has Mendocino County done with these funds? Because the last slide is confusing and you're like, okay, well, what can we do with this? So what Mendocino County has done. So right now, currently, we have 3 projects and one in the works. I talked a little bit about what we're doing with the Round Valley Community Cleanup, and we're working closely with the Round Valley Indian Tribes on this one. We also have a contract with West Business Development Corporation to provide micro enterprise business technical assistance. We provide a significant chunk of money to work with them to provide one-on-one counseling to small businesses to help them get going, answer their questions, provide workshops, and really give them the support they need to be competitive in today's world. I also talked a little bit about, we had our business assistance and recovery loan fund. So those loans are going to come back to us as the county into our program income fund, which we can then turn into other projects for the county, which is a non-competitive source of money that we can turn into more CDBG projects. Another application we have in development that we're queuing up for the 2025 NOFA, which will be coming up in summer 2025, will be an ADA project for our Mill Creek Park. As many of you know, funding for parks, unless you want to create a brand new one or do something splashy, is for general maintenance is hard. CDBG is a way you can get at things you need for your parks in a unique way. And one way we're looking at CDBG is doing the really needed work of ADA upgrades. And so we're going at doing some really needed work at one of our parks. Past projects we've done a lot of ADA work with CDBG. We've done some work in the town of Mendocino. We've done some work, again, Pelican Bluff was another ADA project on the coast. We did also at Mill Creek, we did some more ADA work at that park. We also bought a piece of property and helped rehabilitate it so it could be one of our homeless shelters. We also did housing with it. We helped with some senior housing. We helped get one of our low moderate income housing. We brought kind of the last chunk of money to it so it could get across the finish line and be fully funded with Acorn Valley. And then the Live Oak transitional housing is a really interesting program of turning old motel into transitional housing for the homeless. So there are things that can be a real force for good for this project. One thing to note, the things you can't do with this funding, and there's more, but this is the short list. It cannot be used for general government expenses. So anything that you would routinely fund with your general fund, you cannot use. You cannot use it for the general operating and maintenance expenses of public facilities, improvements, and services. So no, it's not going to fix your roads. It's not going to do your regular maintenance for your parks or buy vehicles for your fleet. It's not going to help you with your electrification or going green for the most part. There is a way kind of around that. Improvements to build, it's not going to fix your roof. It's, and a lot of things that people like, well, the front part of our we're a small rural area. A lot of folks are like, well, we have one big building. The front part serves the general public, but the back part is, this office, it's the IT building. No one goes into that part. Improvements to the building that part of it serves the public and part of it doesn't. That gets tricky, and CDBG doesn't like that for the most part. If you're going to do improvements to buildings, they really only like to see accessibility for the disabled populations. There is a way that I'm talking to HCD about doing energy efficiency projects. I haven't quite threaded the needle there, but they're open to have that conversation. If the building truly 100% serves just the public, like our social services building. So I haven't got that application through and funded, but they're open to have that conversation with you. You can't buy equipment or furnishings for a property. You can't, this is a big one. You can't build housing with these funds. You can help get the site ready. You can help with accessibility to the site. You can help with sidewalks. You can help with lighting, but you can't build housing. HCD has other programs that'll help fund building of housing. You can't do income payments. So, a lot of folks love the basic universal income idea to help with poverty. This program will not fund that. And then for projects that are program income projects, and we'll talk about I keep saying this, program income in a minute. You cannot fund planning projects or public service projects. Jeff, did you want to say anything about what you can't do with CDBG before we leave there?
No, that was good, Kelly.
Okay. So talking about the NOFA. So the NOFA was just open in August for pretty much one day. It was open and then it closed. But we'll talk a little bit about it. The 2024 NOFA allowed for a variation on a theme, but you could you submit 3 applications. You could apply for up to $3.6 million in between those 3 applications. They have this odd terminology of over-the-counter and competitive that is still confusing to me to this day. Basically, over-the-counter, as far as I understand it, is infrastructure or public facility, housing, or economic development. Competitive solicitation are more intangible things like public services, planning and technical assistance. The more tangible items for a project, the over the counter, are your big ticket projects. Those are one for the NOFA that just closed. 1.5 million to 3.3 million was this NOFA cycle. The competitive solicitation, the more intangible, more service-oriented type of projects were $300,000 up to maximums. There was also a tribal set aside in this NOVA of 1.25%. So that was this NOFA cycle. One thing to note about applying for these funds, HCD has a very, very high threshold for application. They want these projects to be shovel ready at the time of application. Shovel ready means not just having a budget, but you have to have all your environmental work done and submitted to them before you apply. You have to have certification that your plans and specs are bid ready. You have to have public hearings done and proof submitted. You have to, there's a long list of things that they want, and it is very demanding. So if you are thinking that you want to go after CDBG, my recommendation to you right now is start today. Start talking to your HDD rep and start building your stuff. The drop date for the NOFA in 2025 is June 2025. That means that June, July, August, the application will probably open in August, but HCD is notorious for not following their own deadlines. So yeah, take it with a grain of salt that it'll open June 25. Jeff, did you have anything you want to add here?
No, I think the notorious thing is good.
Program income. So we get to bring program income. So some CDBG activities such as business assistance loans generate program income, which can extend your CDBG dollar further. So anytime you get in gross income back, you can hold it in a separate fund, and then you can reuse it, but only for CDBG eligible projects and programs that comply with all the CDBG guidelines. And you have to apply to HCD just like you would with any other application for competitive funds, except you're not competing against anyone. You're just asking HCD to use your funds that you have in your PI account. PI can't be banked. You have to have a plan on how you're going to use it, or HCD can come and say, we're going to take this away from you. You can do a few things with it. You can put it in one of your competitive application budgets. Say, hey, the limit is 3.3 million. My project is 3.5 million. Look, we're going to kick in 200 from our PI account. You can do a PI only application. A few of Mendocino projects are just PI only applications, and you can submit PI only applications any time of the year. You don't have to wait for a NOFA award. So that's really helpful. And you can also add PI to an existing award. So if you have a project that's already open and it's going over budget, or there's an issue, you can ask to have more funds added. Yes, Josh, if you have a PI project, the accounting gets tricky. That is something that you will have to work with your auditor on if you're in the governmental side. When you have funds returning, you're also having interest payments coming. You have to track those separately. The accounting side of it is a little more difficult if you're having revenue coming back in. But you might feel that it is worth your time and effort to have more funds available for additional projects.
Yeah, I mean, that it's sort of like a little bit of a revolving loan function
Yes.
in some regards, but really requires that rather sophisticated, financial tracking. aspect, which, you know, I think is why there's finance directors and local agencies, but like for CBOs and other organizations, they just, you know, I guess, you know, they'd be partnering maybe with local government to go after these funds or whatever, but just keep that in mind, you know, that it's not a small undertaking.
Yeah, I would say that if you wanted to create a revolving business loan fund, they don't like you to call it a revolving business loan fund. They don't like that terminology. But if you were going to create a business loan program and wanted it to create a PI, a program income for you, you should recognize that it is going to create a long-term commitment for your organization to service those loans for the life of those loans. A recommendation that I would put in for anybody considering that is make sure that your loans have a condition or some language around forgiveness in case you need to use that card. There might be a time when going after the loan or servicing the loan or some horrible thing happens, it is not in the interest of the organization to invest in getting those funds back. If the loan is only got $2,000 left on it, but it's going to take you $8,000 worth of staff time and effort to get that $2,000, but you don't have any language in the agreement about the, you know, your organization being able to forgive this loan. HCD and CDBG allows for these loans to be completely forgivable as long as you meet the criteria that you met the service of the LMJ or the LMA, whatever it is that you said you were going to do. So that would be my recommendation.
And is it fair to say, and I see Bridget's got her hand up
Yeah.
there, but just is it fair to say that, you know, folks who have the interest in these programs might be able to access agreements, example agreements that, you know, you all share amongst the different public agencies at least? How does that work? Or is that Jeff Lucas's business?
No, well, can I answer this one, Kelly?
Yes, go for it,
This,
Jeff.
this all goes to this whole capacity thing, and
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the really fun stuff you can do with this money. Just a couple of examples, but we work with SBA, USDA, you know, the CDFIs, tax credits and stuff. This program, we've been doing it for about 35 years, is extremely labor intensive.
Yeah.
And their systems, their software, their interpretations of regulations have changed. While the rules and regs have not changed at the federal level, they have changed at the state level and how they interpret them. So it's a very difficult program to implement in many respects, especially for the administration of it. And a lot of it is because of the details that are required, but a lot of it also is the way the state implements the program, and timelines change, interpretations change. So I just want to caution folks about that. But on the other hand, if you do have the capacity via the jurisdiction in-house, like a Kelly, or you have a subrecipient, a nonprofit entity that has some experience in this, maybe they're a regional organization, then this program can be supplemental to some of the other programs that are provided with the other sources. I want to give you one example of how the program is burdensome time-wise. That program income money that comes back in, you know, it's like an USDA IRP deal. The money goes out and it comes back in, and you're tracking it, and then you want to continue to reuse it. Well, if you want to continue to reuse it for, let's say, a 3-year period, you have to make an application for your own funds that are already in-house with you to HCD to get their okay to continue to use it as a revolving loan fund. That is crazy make work bureaucracy. And the process is just like a full application for funding. It's a huge undertaking. And here's one more thing, and then I'll get off this. But they originally said, it's a simple thing, Jeff. It's going to not take too much time. It's just an application, and it'll just be like a couple months, and we'll approve it, and you can get back on track. Okay, well, that was 6 months ago. I still don't have an approval for the use of my funds that my jurisdiction already has. It's really weird. IRP, nobody else does that. So I'm using that as an example to let you know this thing is sort of a monster, but for public benefit, grant funds, for ADA improvements to the Veterans Hall, for example, something simple but useful like that, this is a good source. I want to give you two examples of stuff that's been done locally. After the big valley fire in 2015 in Lake County, the water systems were up on the hill that was ravaged by the fire were just destroyed. Those were antiquated systems anyway. They served about 2,000 households. We were able to access, after a lot of persuasion and discussion with HCD, about $5 million CDBG money, $3 million in Water Resources Control Board funds. We applied those funds to the multitude of systems. We consolidated them. They're uniform. They now provide adequate fire suppression and good, fresh, quality drinking water to those households. We had to do a door-to-door survey to establish low mod household benefit because the census tract documentation was so old because the fire had burned out so many people had moved away, it wasn't accurate. So we did that. It was a good program. It did work. The paper requirements to meet all the standards that HCD had there's stacks of it, but it was a good project, and I don't think we could have gotten the funds from any place else to do that work. Another one in Mendocino County, and this is a bit old, was the really fun deal. I like the lending part. All the rest of it is sort of what we have to do. But Agwood Lumber Company was having cash flow issues. They employed about 45 people. They're over near Ukiah. They had a term loan with Savings Bank of about 1.5, another commercial real estate loan of about $1 million. So they also had a revolving line of credit at about 310, but they did not have any cash on hand to buy logs so that they could in turn mill them and sell them. And this was during the crash in the housing industry. And they were one of the last mills standing. They had about 45 people working for them. So we were able to work with the bank. They reduced the interest rates and the repayment schedule. They linked the repayment schedule for the 2 term loans. And then we were able to take out 2 million of the revolving line, bring that line back down to where they had a higher ceiling again. And then they could use those funds to go back to purchasing logs and using it like they were intentionally, like it was designed for. That was a really cool project. It was great. And one of the things we learned too was that the bank officer in charge of this particular client had allowed them to use that money for equipment purchases and so on. And it really wasn't a working line. It wasn't used the way it was supposed to. So we were able to work with them to correct that situation. Now that business has about 85 employees. That expanded, and it's healthy and it's doing great. So that's the fun stuff you can do with this money. And once you learn to work with your banks, and I know you guys are all smart and know how to do this stuff, but once the banks understand the benefit of how this program can reduce their risk by coming in second lien position, providing a loan at 1% for a 10-year term, they in turn see how that will work for them. And we like to do companion loans, especially Savings Bank has been a wonderful partner for that. So that's the fun stuff. And I wanted to leave it on that end because all the rest of it is kind of tough.
So for specialized use cases, it's great. And if you have the right capacity.
Yeah. Yes, Josh.
I see Bridget there has been patiently waiting.
Hi. Yeah, I'm gonna take Jeff's positive note and then turn it into a negative.
Great, Bridget.
But no, one positive thing I just wanted to point out about the PI is that if you can keep it under 35,000 a year, you get to defederalize that. And that's how we get around having to deal with the reporting and all of that. We had some old housing rehab loans that we structured to have smaller payments come in, so we get to use that money for whatever we want at the end of the year. But then I did also want to echo Jeff's comments about not having the right team to do this is really dangerous. A lot of times the state reps know less about the program than the grantees, and you really struggle to get assistance with getting through the regs, and you will be liable for paying the money back if it's done wrong. So you really have to rely on having a team that knows what they're doing, and it is very difficult program to run, just as an FYI. And even when you were talking about like equipment purchases and things like that, we have made some equipment purchases in the past that now require an audit every year for eternity. And there's no grant funds to pay for the administrative time that's spent doing that. So those are also things that you have to consider when you're picking your projects. The housing rehab projects, I have to audit that every year. I don't get any grant funding to cover that. The purchase of a food truck requires an audit every year. So just those are things to consider with how you're picking your programs.
You can, on the up note, Lacey, I'm gonna bring this right back to the positive. You can use these funds, for example, to purchase a fire truck in a low, moderate household income neighborhood,
Mhm.
which is kind of good. It's good stuff, but again, you have to have the capacity to manage the application and then the administration and all the rest of it.
In our last meeting, I thought that this was a recommendation for the cash flow issue that may arise with catalyst funding, to use PI dollars for that. And that I just kind of gasped at the thought of that, because it's not easily, those aren't funds that you can easily access. A lot of people try not to keep PI because it's so difficult.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, again, it does have great uses, but it's also really difficult to get through the process.
Yeah. What I see as a possibility is for our region is a collaboration as we set a strategy for our region, is a collaboration to reach our shared strategy and goals if possible. We all have our individual needs, but there may be some room to talk. We've all been swimming in this pond of CDBG, and it's been very isolated because there isn't a lot of support. There aren't a lot of examples. And we've been figuring this out one by one. And if there is catalyst funding out there for a project, that's something that we might be able to go for more and make the impact bigger in some way with additional funding, in some way through the CDBG process. But it all depends on the program. It all depends on the project. It all depends on whatever is brought forth. Without knowing what's going to come out of the RFP process, it's hard to make a statement there. But this is funding that does have an impact in our community, that does align with the stated goals of what we're trying to do. And it does come with a lift, but it is aligned. And I wanted to share what we've been able to do with it, and hope that there's a way that it could help amplify the work that we've all been working on so hard.
So, Kelly, I'd like to add just a little bit more to that, because I think, and see, because I'm so old now, I can remember when we first got into HCD, CDBG stuff, they had people who had experience and an understanding of rural needs um, at HCD, but they were actually paid for with, I think, some USDA TA type money, and they were like circuit riders. They were assigned several counties, and they would come out and they would sit with you and assist you in the application, not only understanding what the project was, um, but assisting you with the application and gathering the documentation and explaining the process and procedures. Although they weren't nearly as complicated as they are now, those folks were really, really helpful. Now, as it is with the state, they just don't have the capacity to do that for a bunch of reasons. And it really would be great to have, maybe it's 2 or 3 folks who understand both the economic development side and community service side and housing side and CDBG, because CDBG typically doesn't stand alone. There's other funding sources that we like to use with them whenever we can. But if we had that capacity in some nonprofit entity or a RISE entity, that would be really, really cool, because then some of these smaller jurisdictions could access that capacity and that technical assistance. It wouldn't, they wouldn't have to pay, a consultant person. They could get that help. And then we could also set it up, I think, in a way that would be ongoing assistance. It wouldn't just be set it up, access the money, and then leave, because as you know, it's the maintaining of the grant and the reporting and the drawdown of funds and all the rest of it that can be time consuming as well. So you mentioned that, Kelly, and I hadn't thought about that, but I think it would be I think it'd be really cool if we could figure out a way to do that. And I'd participate in that, um, to help to get that going, because I got a few more years left of this crazy stuff, and I want to go fishing a whole lot more than I do now. But I'd like to leave a little something for the youngsters like Kelly and who are out there who are so sharp and so good. Um, it's refreshing to see, quite frankly. Anyway, thank you.
Well, I need you for a little bit more, Jeff. I don't know it all yet.
That was my speech.
Well, I've got a little bit more. I'm almost done, I promise.
Yeah.
So how do you do this crazy thing? My first recommendation is there is an HCD rep that is assigned to your region. Reach out and connect today. The best thing to do is if you have an idea, call them and set up appointments and start talking to them. They are available to talk to you virtually unlimited amounts. They may not want to, but they can. I had a standing meeting with them every 2 weeks for a year. So they can work with you to develop your application and walk you through the process. They might just keep trying to refer you to the grants management manual and refer you to paragraph 3, page 42. But if you connect with someone who's halfway decent and just keep asking them questions, well, what about this? How about that? We're thinking about doing this. How do I structure this? They're there and they're supposed to be there to help you with development of your idea and your project and trying to get you to yes. And it will take you, and I'm learning this, it will take you, a good year to get an application from idea to completed and ready to go. And you have to be ready to submit at 9 a.m. on the day that it opens, because that sucker closes and funds are done within 24 hours. And I've seen this happen twice now. So even though they say that window is open for a certain amount of time, it's gone in 24 hours. So just the timing, so everyone's aware. And I know it seems like a long time from now, but the projected date of the NOFA, so the Notice of Funding Availability, is in June 2025. That is a rough date. HCD is notorious for pushing that back. Maybe since they're going to only one time a year, they'll be a little better, but who knows? There will be in that NOFA window, there will be numerous informational webinars and question and answer periods. It's important if you're interested, sign up for everything and go to everything. Some of them are required and you have to attend if you want to submit an application. They also will have other required videos you have to show, you have to say that you watch so you know their process. Application, then it's usually 60 days after the NOFA opens, they drops, they open the applications. They say the application window is open for 60 days. It's never open that long. It's usually, I've seen, like I said, 24 hours, and then the funds are usually allocated. So make sure you get in if you want an application. They're ridiculously slow, though, to get back to you about your application. They say it takes 6 months for contract execution of applications. So one thing to keep in mind, you have to have a project that is complete and ready to go, shovel in the ground. So you have to have all your project work, your budget, your environmental work, all your designs and plans ready to go. Like not just halfway designs, like you have your building permit ready in hand, but you can't start any work. You haven't contracted anybody yet. You're not ready, but you have to wait for that contract to come. It could be 6 to 12 months until that happens. The wild card for HCD right now is that they're supposedly changing to a new grant management software and portal in the next year. So this NOFA may or may not be in that new software. They also have changed the program length. So it used to be 3 years for your project. It is now 2 years and 9 months that you have to do your work. The last 3 months is to allow just for project closeout. So all the paperwork involved with the project. So that's something to keep in mind while you are putting together your project. So if you have an idea, start working on it now, start talking about things now. However, know that there are a network of folks out there. I'm hoping that today can also be part of the process of reaching out and people can start talking to each other, because there isn't a lot of concrete examples that HCD will or can share with you. There are a few, but not many. And it really is through informal networks, like talking to Jeff, that you find, oh, well, this person did this thing. Okay, well, how would you go about structuring that thing? Oh, who did that? Oh, that person did this. Okay. But by creating this, by having conversations and by reaching out to each other, we can get ideas of what we can do to move things forward. And I'll leave it on that little ray of hope that, people are doing good things with this program. Jeff, do you have anything you want to share?
No, that was great. There are some really good, knowledgeable people. Bridget Lacey is one of them too. And I think the local folks who've been doing this for a while really know more about the actual program and their regs and how to use the funds than most of the HCD staff. The HCD staff know about their systems and the changes and their software and that kind of stuff. But it's, I think it's going to be us in the local regional areas that are the ones that are going to have to really learn how to share that information and take advantage of the CDBG program. And it's probably the same with all the other programs that are out there. And I know that's a big reason why RISE exists. So I want to thank you guys for that.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of, the suggestion of somehow coalescing the knowledge at least, and then that in itself, like kind of this working group format, has usefulness, obviously, and then I think there's another level, which is the kind of working through it capacity, kind of ongoing, kind of steady preparation of the materials. And then there's also the ongoing administration and reporting out and management piece, and how to think about all of that in the context of a regional resource. That's, I think it's an interesting question. Is that an NGO function? Could that be housed under some kind of regional, economic development funding and financing ongoing capacity? I mean, it just seems like just having these kinds of forums to share information is very helpful, but then the follow on is like, how do we actually get it done and manage it?
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that the County of Mendocino doesn't do this program by itself. We're in partnership with, Jeff and CDS. We work with EDFC, with loan servicing. We work with our Community Development Commission for our housing parts of our program. So even, we've built this over many years, and we have many different partners to make sure that we can implement the different parts of CDBG. We're not in a place to have everything in-house. So we need many community partners to execute this program and make it sustainable over the long term. So if we're going to look at a regional strategy, that would also be, I think you would need a partnership, and it's not just going to fall on one county, one municipality, or one department within that. It's going to be a regional partnership among lots of different players.
Well, and I mean, I love the idea myself, and I would, the regional, whatever we want to call it, capacity person for the region. And you obviously could have someone who is more than full-time and a little crazy just to deal with the CDBG part, but there's so many others, right? And
Right.
in my organization, we have very small community services districts and other things that, not just for this program, obviously, but for anything, don't have, I mean, they have a part-time person who's doing the billing, right? And they have a part-time shared water operator. So there's just no ability for them to go get that. So, I mean, I think it's worth having more discussion around that, in other forums around Redwood, Reason, Rise. And then the crazy idea, and this is truly crazy, but it's policy wonky. It might be fun to at least start the discussion, is to look at, I mean, I used to, a million years ago, I used to help make decisions on how to spend. I was a student, literally, on a little committee in the city of Davis, because we were in an entitlement community. So we got this, we did the public hearings, we got to make all those decisions ourselves. And, while the amount of money that's potentially could flow into an area going from non-entitlement to entitlement may diminish, or maybe less, I suspect that, there's a diminishing return on all the time and effort and money spent on trying to get. So I'm just wondering, we're talking, coming out of Redwood, Reason, Rise, about having some regional viewpoint legislatively, either at the state or at the national level. And maybe this is one where we say, well, why can't we do entitlement communities that are multiple counties, and bring that in? So we, it's maybe a crazy idea, but we're at 136,000. So, us and Mendocino together meet that entitlement threshold. And the county line really is an arbitrary thing, right? It really makes no, only governments recognize government boundaries, right? So I don't know. I'm just wondering, maybe just that pipe dream legislative or regulatory action that we want to push for the region. But if the state is serious and really wants to put its money where its mouth and around regionalism, then they need to look at themselves as well, and that would include this program, and at least have a viewpoint that could go up to the feds. If not, I mean, I certainly would be willing to go to our Congressman Huffman here and see if he'd be at all interested in having that discussion, because he covers the whole region. I think he doesn't have Del Norte, but yeah.
So Greg, we actually 20 years or so ago, we wrote, I just got so frustrated with ACD and the way they were doing stuff. We wrote an application to HUD
I can't believe you were frustrated by HCD, Jeff.
Well, it's like being married to an alcoholic. I mean, you never know where they're coming from. But anyway, so we wrote this application to HUD for that very purpose, to do the process of research, establish the need, and why it would work, and why a certain region, when we were thinking, oh, Northern California could be, become like an entitlement community in a way. They said no, but I always liked the idea. So if anybody wants to pursue that or check it out, I'll be happy to tag along on that one.
Well, we're having a discussion here. We had one the other day with the city of Eureka and Arcata and some other folks, and at least the elected officials and the community development director I had in my office was just like, we can't do something about this because we're missing opportunities. Just because the process, the lengthy process that Kelly talks about, coupled with the incredible amount of capacity that's needed, and they're just saying, oh yeah, we just didn't have any time to even go after it. So there, as I mentioned earlier, is that, well, you get less maybe as an allocation if you go to entitlement, but if you're not even applying on non-autonomous programs because it's so complicated and you just don't have capacity, then hell, take 50 cents on the dollar. At least it's there and you can make your own decisions.
And you can do the real work with it. You could just have like a 5-year plan, like an entitlement community has. Okay,
Yeah.
this is what we're going to do. HUD says yes, as long as you're using the funds within those parameters.
Right.
And for CDBG eligible activities, you're fine. And I've worked with entitlement communities, and after working with HCD for years, I was like, well, wait, what? This is too straightforward. Where's all the confusing stuff? And they're like, what are you talking about? So I really think there's some merit to your thought. And
all right, well,
yeah,
a blind squirrel finds an acorn once in a while. But let's bring it up at the broader Redwood Region Rise, point of view discussion. I don't even know what we're calling it yet, but it's sort of like, how do we exercise some pressure on policy after we get projects?
I think the tipping point on our end was where we had to apply to use funds that we already had. You have to, that's just really, really difficult to understand how that's efficient or logical at all. But and I've seen them come and go to all kinds of crazy stuff. So let me know when let me know when you want to pursue this seriously, and I'd be happy to help.
That can be our legacy project. I too do not want to. I am too more wanting to fish than work these days. But
Stacy had something to say.
Oh no!
You came on screen, Stacy.
Come on,
tell us about.
Come on, Stacy.
I was just giving you my undivided attention.
Stacy, you've been reading emails and stuff the whole time.
Nope, I'm taking notes like always.
Good.
I like the regional approach idea. I think that is worth tabling for larger discussions.
Sure. Susan, where does this end up? These great inspirations for, ongoing and importantly needed regional capacities.
Well, oh, here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No. Okay, good. I am thinking that we have a leadership group that we just put together. We've had one meeting. And that would definitely be a good place to sort of bring this up. And you're in it, Josh. So.
Okay. I'll bring it up, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, and I can bring it up too. We can just send a sort of heads up to Amanda. Okay. And I think this would be a good place to put, we've got all these different things that we're working on in sort of this long-term thinking about what's going to happen in the future with
Redwood Region Rise. So I think that's going to be part of a voting block discussion, but I think the leadership group will be having first run at all of those.
Yeah, just economic development finance capacity in general, and then under that CDBG being one of the key line items, you know.
Yeah. So
Grants in general and grant administration being another, you know, kind of couple grant writing and grant administration.
yeah, there's that. And I don't know why or if it makes sense. I think because we're thinking of the regionality of it. There's also that EDD discussion, right? About whether we wanted to do that. And I'm just wondering all of these different ways that we can say this regional work makes us a single entity through the roadmap. If we got an, you know, economic development district, if you really thought about this, maybe we put all those things together and it's a stronger selling point. But honestly, I mean, North Edge has worked with CDBG, but I never have. So